Let's talk about intense Irene. I think you know intense Irene. She's there all the time, practicing really hard and going way too far with things. I had a teacher who was an intense Irene once, and he told me, he was teaching me something about twisting and turning in martial arts. And he said, yeah, the first time I learned how to twist, I just went home and I twisted and I twisted, I twisted, I worked as hard as I could at it until all the ligaments in my arms and all the tissue and everything started to bruise. And he was so proud of it. Now, this guy was really good, but there was an intensity to the practice, this stage of forging the practice and learning the practice that just went way too far, and it went into injury. So an intense Irene, right, takes a piece of information that she learns and gets it in her mouth and just chews the hell out of it. You'll see this all the time, right? Like in some of these more yang practices, you'll see the eye, watch the eyes go right into that full intensity to really fill everything up, and it's all adrenaline and it's all everything revved up. But there's something else that kind of goes on here too that's, you know, on the one hand, I wish every student practiced more and we all could benefit from going deeper into our practices. But the thing that intense Irene has to watch out for is missing the big picture. So she'll get this one little piece and focus on it and just train it to death, train the heck out of it, and it's great. That's what you want to do. But what happens is you start training it at this level of depth, and the pieces that you've ignored that aren't connected to what you're working on at this other layer don't keep up with it. So all of a sudden you have a weird imbalance where one element is pulling everything else out of whack. So these people tend to have, she'll have some pretty interesting skills and pretty well-developed abilities, but it's not necessarily bound, you know, it's not necessarily connected to everything else. I think of it, maybe a better way to describe it, if this is ever a good way to describe anything, is like pizza dough, right? Imagine the dough here, and you start to stretch it in one direction. You can't take it just in that one direction and make a nice round piece of dough to make a pizza on. You can't make pizza by just stretching one way. You've got to tease it a little bit this way, then you pull it a little bit that way, pull it a little bit, right? So you slowly and evenly work all the different angles till it spreads out into a nice round shape, right? The elements of your practice are just like that. If you take one, you take the dough like this and only try to stretch it in one direction, you're not going to end up with a pizza. You're going to end up with broken dough. So intense Irene gets this one piece of her practice and just stretches it this way, but often will miss out on balancing and stretching everything else, getting all the other elements, all the other components of a good, healthy practice working in harmony with this one piece. So be careful about training one thing into too much depth, or you'll end up just like intense Irene.